Not to be complicit, not to accept everyone else is silent. It must be alright. Not to keep one's mouth shut, to hold on to one's job. Not to accept public language as a cover and decoy. Not to put friends and family before the rest of the world. Not to say I am wrong when you know the government is wrong. Not to be just a bought behaviour pattern. To accept the moment and fact of choice. I am a human being, and I exist. A human being and a citizen of the world, responsible to that world and responsible for that world.
My mum was from Inchicore, which is only across the road. My dad was from the ranch, which is just beside Inchicore. They met and married and got a house in Ballyfermot. But it was a working class area. You could call into any neighbour. Just good, friendly area.
Great community.
Yeah. We had a good upbringing.
Great friends. There was the field straight across from our family home, and we all played in it morning, noon and night. The only time you'd go in is when you were called for your dinner. We'd be still shouting at Steve and we'd be finished and he'd be still playing football.
It's very innocent childhood. They really just played across the road, playing football. He was on football teams, he'd go training, he was in the scouts. But again, it was all local lads. They never really ventured very far.
We all seemed to play on the opposite side of the road with all the friends, and on this side there was Stephen, Peter Kelly, the two Kilfields and George Garner. And for those that, we were only toddlers, but we never mixed. And then eventually we did mix, and it would have been around about 1969, and that's how we became friends. And for a while me and Stephen were really kind of close, and we were playing football. I'd pick him if I was captain, and if he was captain he'd pick me.
He loved his football. He was Leeds, Paul Doran was Chelsea, and there'd be arguments over the teams, you know, they'd play together.
We wanted this Manchester City away top, and Stephen runs into the field. So we'd no such thing as shin guards, you know the shin guards? But you know, you see the footballers and you see they look great, you know. So Stephen walked out and he said, Stephen, what are they? Yes. So where do you get the shin guards? They're not shin guards. I said, what are they? So we rolled them down. I said, where'd you get them? I got them in my mum's press. Okay, yeah. And needless to say, they were sanitary towels. Steve was mad about soldiers. He loved, when he was a kid, he had Airfix models, and he loved the German soldiers for some reason, like, you know. And he got me into them as well.
And he would spend hours and hours setting them up in the back bedroom. And I remember running upstairs and pushing in the bedroom door. And I'll never, ever forget the shout. And he was just so annoyed. I'd knocked the whole lot down. Really, he was so annoyed.
I used to put them on the blankets on the bed, and he used to crumble up the blankets.
That's right.
Because the blankets were mountains.
Yeah.
And he'd have them hiding.
Yeah.
The soldiers
behind,
be hiding
you know.
behind the mountains.
Yeah.
And it just crazy things, but that's what he loved
He
playing with.
enjoyed, yeah.
Yeah, he loved it.
Mum would take care of us all day and clean and cook the dinner, but my dad was kind of the person
the
who
homework.
do homework. Stephen might ask a question like, where's the Kalahari Desert, or where's this? Down had come the big atlas, and my dad would be talking about nomads and different things, and I'd be upset because I still had maths to do and it was 8:30, and you know, like there was always books in the house, and my dad loved knowledge, you know, so I think Stephen brushed off on him. He would have been interested in Sinn Féin and on Public, and he'd go into town and buy that, and my dad used to go, what's this doing in the house? And yeah, he had an interest, always had an interest.
My dad worked for British Leyland. He was a foreman, and Stephen was really opinionated. And he said one night, messing something like, "You're working for the Queen," and I always remember my dad saying, "Well, she put the food on the table that you're eating." But they loved each other,
Yeah.
but it was clash of personalities.
He got great results in his intercert, which is like the GCSE. It came in the post, and I remember him running upstairs and locking the bathroom door, and you'd hear, B, 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 A. Like, he was so excited. But he kind of always had it. He never sat up in his room studying. When he was about 16, he worked up in the Green Isle Hotel. Then he got his full-time job would have been Pond Lear or Multiprint, a printing company.
My first recollection, I think, is the Foggy Jew. Now, the Foggy Jew was a pub in Dame Street, and I think that's when we met. And I was kind of impressed, to be the wrong word, but I knew he'd been to Bobby Sands' funeral. And that would have been my entry into, you know, I suppose we were black flags, putting up posters, graffiti on walls. So Stephen would have been doing his bit where in the Ballyfermot area, where we would have been probably focused on the areas that we were in. And again, it's apt for him that it was the James Connolly coming, as far as I remember, that he was in. There was a major time, you know, with the hunger strikes, the H blocks, the Maze escape, extradition. So anything that was going, I suppose, he was involved in at a local area, you know what I mean?
Stephen immersed himself in Republican politics. His first child, Trina, was born on September 28, 1982, to Stephen and Linda.
I remember sitting in the front garden, and he walked up the road, big grin, smiling, it's a girl, and we were all excited. And I don't know, like, he just fell into it, really. You know, I know he was a young parent, but they were happy together, and he idolised Trina.
Stephen, Linda and Trina moved to their first home as a family in Rialto. Every Friday evening, Stephen took Trina to the local newsagents for a brunch ice cream and a Rainbow Bright comic. Stephen worked in multiprint, fixing various machines up and down the east coast of Ireland.
I was a delivery driver. I used to do collections in Dublin. We went into a company called Multiprint, who printed labels for all the big supermarkets and things like that, you know. And you kind of knew Stephen, they nodded at him. He happened to walk over to me one day, and he says, "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" He says, "Do you live in Derry?" I says, "I do actually." This would have been around November '84, and the conversation kind of ended there, and then he came back to me maybe a couple of weeks after, and he says, "Listen, we're thinking I'm going up to a Bloody Sunday March," which would have been January '85 then, like. He says, "And we're kind of looking for digs. Do you know anywhere we could stay?" And I just off the cuff, not thinking another thing about it, says, "You can stay with us."
Like, the history of us going to Derry, and a lot of people from all over Ireland, was, you know, you were always, there was never an issue with being put up. You mean, you could arrive at the bus station and someone would put you up on that gaff. Do you know what I mean? Before you could just go to the pub and, that night you'd be put up.
And then on the day of the Bloody Sunday March in 1985, next thing, Christine, my wife and my mother were eating our Sunday dinner, which we made early because we were going to a march. My wife had me look up the street and seen these three boys walking down. Paddy McCormick,
Jim Kearney,
and Stephen. And I had looked out and nearly myself. And I said, Mother, you know what? I forgot to tell you. I said, them boys could stay in our house. They're going to a march. And everything was a panic again. But we invited them in. And I think the three of them slept on the floor that night. And I just continued on from there, and we made up a special bond and a great friendship.
What we found strange was if you drew a line between Dublin and Galway and you went north, for young lads, working class lads anyway, you got a great welcome. Where if you went south, you didn't. They were glad to see it, that you were supporting, their communities probably, you know what I mean? I was actually thinking the other day, it's funny enough that his political awareness he used to talk about was kind of ironically was his memory of Bloody Sunday seemed to be quite clear, even though he was only about 9 or 10. He used to talk about that.
I have a recollection of meeting him in 1985 when he came up, and I remember him and his mate Paddy McCormick, Whacker as he was known, being at a party. Now, in all fairness, I don't remember much about Stephen, but what I do remember is his mate Paddy, who had a real broad, thick Dublin accent, and you really honestly couldn't understand a word he was saying.
We were all of the same age, and everybody went to Bloody Sunday marches, and I would have seen him out at the marches right enough. It was the brogue, the accent, and he was a looker, now you have to say. Even though he wore glasses, he was a looker, and he would have turned your head like.
The march itself, I suppose, was one of the key dates in the kind of political calendar, where people came to Derry and not only marked and commemorated Bloody Sunday, but it was a chance for activists to come together and highlight all sorts of our injustices.
If I think about what brought Stephen to Derry and why Stephen was so taken by Derry, besides the fact that he fell in love a few times when he came here with Derry women, dangerous things. He was living in Dublin, and he was a Republican, and he couldn't understand why there wasn't any kind of political activity around what was happening in the north in Dublin. Not enough for him. There was only a marginal few people. And I think that's what brought him here. He came with that outside, with an outside perspective, but he got involved and was welcomed in because of his politics. I met Stephen through 2020 Vision. 2020 Vision was a kind of legacy of a festival which we called the 2020 Vision Festival in 1989 to mark the 20th anniversary of the reintroduction of British soldiers to the streets of Derry and Ireland. The idea behind the festival was to look back 20 years and critically reflect on 20 years of resistance to see what the next 20 years would be.
Back then, in the kind of black and white days, things were pretty grim. The conflict was going full pelt. There was a lot of sadness. But people were resilient, and they found ways to lift themselves up.
A key part of that festival was a 100-foot banner that had been made to sort of symbolise 20 years. It was 100 foot long, and every 10 feet of the banner was 2 years. So I think when Stephen came along, it was a bit scuffed from its different travels. He suggested he'd be up for painting it again, so he repainted it over 3 months, just systematically going up himself and just panel by panel, just repainting it. And that's where I got to know him, just in chats and conversations.
Stephen, on his own, like some sort of monk, repainted the whole banner. And he went there every morning for several weeks and months.
I can't remember ever actually being introduced to him. So there came a moment just when you realised that Stephen was like part of the furniture around the bogside. And there he was, and a constant presence.
The first time I met Stephen, I opened the door to him at my mum and daddy's house in Deanery Street. And I went out and I said to my mammy, "Ma, there's a fella at the door, he's looking for old shoes." Stephen was explaining they were doing a project, they were looking for old shoes, and the shoes would represent prisoners of the conflict. And so my ma always had a deep sense of justice, so her and Stephen were having a big chat, and I was listening away and I was thinking, oh my God, how good looking is this fella at our door, and the accent.
Stephen and fellow activists, including Jim Collins and Jim Keyes, became increasingly involved in developing creative and innovative responses to political issues, campaigns and developments in the north of Ireland.
We laid the shoes out in the shape of a rainbow, symbolising family members who were locked up as a result of the conflict. He seen partition as the evil of all evil, so he had plenty of energy to jump up and physically move Dragon's Teeth with his own, with his bare hands. People lived with that kind of conflict for decades and witnessed and experienced a lot on all sides, in all communities, but particularly our communities. And humour played a key role as a way of tackling serious issues as well. The cops and the Brits were kind of short-footed. They didn't really know how to respond. So it left them all kind of at odds. What are we meant to do with these idiots inside cardboard boxes? So it worked at all sorts of different levels. And again, a perfect example of creatively be involved in struggle and protest. Doesn't always have to be white line pickets, demonstrations and all the rest of it. You can find creative ways that get a message across. The physical creation and the making and the delivery of whatever it was we were doing was 2 or 3 people on any given night. And we were kind of saying, look, the people who have the most weapons are the British Army and the Loyalists and all these military installations. And again, we used the opportunity to subvert the billboards. The peace process was going full pelt. Let's do something that talks about the so-called peace process. We came upon the idea of process peace instead of process peace. So that was us dressed up, in our kind of process peace outfit. We could talk and engage with people about the process or the lack of the meaningful process on the ground. It was all in some respects, it was politicians who were going to sort it all out for us, so that was our attempt to doing that. It was great, brilliant crack. We had queer laughs. Unfortunately, we never thought about if you need to go to the toilet, you're out having a few beer in the bars. Plus, that's made out of they're drums, so you can't sit down. So we had to fucking stand about all night. We couldn't sit down all night, and paying was quite difficult. Our kind of circle was small, but really close, and then beyond that there was other friends. Your friends, the different degrees, but he was a big part of my life, as was Sean Semple. We were involved in activism, and I suppose with Sean was also involved in the Féile. There wasn't a weekend that passed or that we got together up in me, Stephen and Sean. Them days, we hadn't really much money. You could have got 3 bottles of wine for a tenner, so 2 of us maybe might have got 3 bottles. So you had 6 bottles, and then we would, if we had the money, we would buy a decent bottle, something that was a bit more palatable. And if you'd end up you drink the good bottle first, and then drink the pish after that.
I met him in the Gweedore bar, and how I knew he wasn't a Derry man was because he asked me did I want to go to a party with him, and then asked me what I wanted to drink because he was going to buy a carry-out. If he was a Derry man, he would have said buy your own. And that's kind of where the 21-year adventure started. The thing with Stephen, I suppose, that really drew me to him, I had spent 7 years in England and I was surrounded by academics. Stephen was so well read. He was so well versed in art, literature, film, music, and obviously politics, which was his big passion. We started going out. I obviously got to know friends of his. He was friends mostly with Hawks and Sean. In my head, they were the 3 amigos, and instead of me kind of feeling like a spare part, you know, joining them on nights out, I always felt welcome.
Stephen then got involved there was a piece of ground in the Bogside, as people know, the famous Gasyard, the old side of the Gasyard, and there was a festival started to get organised, the Gasyard Wall Féile.
I was festival coordinator in 1996 with the Gasyard Wall Féile. The festival had really started, its origins was around 1993 in the Bogside, and the thinking behind it was to kind of actually lay claim to the Gasyard site. It was kind of partly inspired by the Belfast Féile and football, so we wanted to do something similar in Derry in the Bogside, and it was about kind of champion community art, politics, culture.
I first met Stephen in the early days of the Nerve Centre. You know, he was interested in music, he was interested in film, he was interested in digital and putting sort of digital tools in the hands of young people. So right away I kind of thought, well, this is definitely one of us. The minute you meet him and you start working with Stephen, you sort of realise the sort of level of energy and the level of kind of commitment, and that's how we got involved in working together, establishing the powerhouse. So the idea of having a digital centre, you know, where young people could, you know, have their very first sort of engagement with film or digital or music or recording or whatever, you know, but in their own neighbourhood, was something that we, I suppose, really felt was was a vital thing to have. I think Stephen really was the key person on the ground, you know, with the sort of, once again, the sort of energy, you know, and commitment to kind of make that happen.
Down the square in the Bogside, a couple of wee lads, Connor Morrison and Colin Bradley and that came onto the square where we were playing football, and they were telling me about this place that was just opened down at Agro Corner, you know, and they were saying about how there's decks in there, and they were sort of fascinated by dance culture and stuff at the time, and so we all started going down there.
We're caught up in the midst of the riots in the 90s. The bog and the Bradley was completely deprived. It gave us an outlet, somewhere to go. I always would have been somebody that was interested in painting, drawing and the likes, but I've never ever had a chance to use a computer to do the same thing. Whenever we get into the powerhouse, I was introduced to the likes of Photoshop and PageMaker, Illustrator.
Stephen Gargan and Hawks and, you know, all the people that worked down there, they were great influences when we were sort of a wee bit broken by the troubles. And Stephen was always this low-key guy, and you never really knew how important he was amongst the group until you actually started seeing the people around him work around him, because he was that important, but he also had a sort of softer touch in how he dealt with things, and there's an intrinsic link there, and those tools that were handed down to us in that technology centre that are now living and going around the Bogside and through the video work that I do and stuff like that.
Along with his involvement in the Féile and the Powerhouse, Stephen remained a key member in the Bloody Sunday Justice campaign, which continued to demand truth and justice for all those murdered and injured on Bloody Sunday.
Both himself, myself and a few others were there to protest. You know, how dare a British Royal come to Derry, particularly one who's Commander-in-Chief of a parachute regiment. Stephen wasn't afraid to put himself out there. He was shouting there, what about Bloody Sunday? Later on that night, we were probably in the Dunlow or somewhere, having a beer, and he says, Jesus, I'm raging. He says, I could have touched them, I was that close. If only if I had reached out and punched them. He says, I wouldn't have cared. I would end up getting time, but it wouldn't have mattered. For the satisfaction that it would have given me and give the families and the people campaigning for justice for Bloody Sunday.
All campaigns like this, when you look back on, it's always a small number of people who kept them going, who provided leadership, provided coherence for everybody else. And that was the names out of the half dozen people, you know, who did most to pursue the truth about Bloody Sunday. They all would be Derry people, with one exception.
Dad loved stories. He loved a good story, whether it was a friend telling him a story, you know, real or embellished. He loved storytelling, and whether that was in a book or a film or in a song, I think the great loves of his life, you know, the basis of those things was in a human story and passing things on, you know.
So one of the things that we started to talk about early on when we were chatting about Bloody Sunday and doing murals that would kind of widen it to a wider public, we thought of the real project would be to make a film about it. People don't understand why there's this big deal about Bloody Sunday, and the only way to really get people to see it is they actually show what happened, because besides the, there's 20,000 odd people there on the day, and people would say 20,000 people seen it, but 20,000 people didn't see it. 20,000 people ran for their lives, and some of them seen one person killed, or maybe two people, maybe some people seen 3 or 4 people killed, but nobody's seen the whole thing. And he was interested in getting Jimmy McGovern because he wrote Hillsborough about the Hillsborough disaster. There was lots of parallels with Bloody Sunday there.
And we saw an example of, tragedy that was caused by negligence of the state, and then people, trying to take the state to court, try to get an inquiry into it, and then a whitewash kind of coming out of it, and it obviously was so reminiscent of what happened on Bloody Sunday.
Stephen was always saying that would be the person we should try to approach for Bloody Sunday.
So we made contact with Jimmy, invited him over to one of the film festivals we were involved in, and Stephen, Jim, Alison, and myself, we spent an afternoon trying to talk Jimmy into taking on the writing of a screenplay about Bloody Sunday. He felt that had to be done by a Derry person, and we were saying, but we've seen what you've done with Hillsborough. It would be great if we could show Hillsborough to the Bloody Sunday families.
We met with the families and said, look, what we want to do is we think this man can tell a story of Bloody Sunday, but it's for you to decide, not us. Who are we? We'll bring Jimmy over quietly. We'll screen Hillsborough, and then you have a Q&A with him afterwards.
No, but it's on about I'm not sure, blah blah. I live amongst the paratroopers and all the rest. And I said, fucking no. We were raided by them. Bastards, like coming out of Liverpool. I said, don't talk. I said, I'll tell you what, Jimmy, this is a true story. I said, my brother is 18 and we were being raided one night, and this 4 o'clock in the morning, and this Brit then, I said, they're raiding another, and the brother came down the stairs and out down the kitchen, and this wee Brit followed him out down the kitchen, true story. And he says, look, what did I tell you, mate, what did I tell you? He was a Scouser. What did I tell you, mate? He says, would you please tell your mother, I am so sorry. I didn't join the British Army to come over here and do this to your mother. And our Danny says to him, well, why did you fucking leave? And the fella says to him, I would. He says, only there are no jobs in Liverpool. I says, no, Jimmy, see, because of an accident of birth, you could say, we could have been that Scouser and he could have been us. No. I says, so that's what you're talking about? No. But anyway, in the back of that, Jim McGovern then was known to have said, well, you see, after talking to Perry, and I was all learned, but I was delighted. See, after talking, I'm going to do that.
We weren't sure there'd be a second inquiry when we started to talk about a film, and what we thought was the film needs to be a process whereby people that are carrying the story get some relief from the fact that the story is now being told. The truth is out. We felt it needs to be filmed in Derry, or as much in Derry as possible. It needs to look like Derry, because the key people we're making it for is the people of Derry that didn't see it, that know it happened but didn't actually see it. The next group of people is the people of Ireland, and the next group of people is the people in the UK.
Stephen Gargan made a vow, and it was that we weren't going to pick the brains of the people of Derry. We weren't even going to tell the story of the people of Derry. The people of Derry would tell their story through us.
It had to be a bulletproof script. We had to make sure that it was going to be attacked from all sides in the UK particularly, and we needed to make sure that everything was locked down, factually checked.
I don't know how many interviews we did, possibly 100. And it was Stephen's insistence that that's the way it should be. Everybody we interviewed at Stephen's insistence again, in their homes, on their terms.
Stephen did wrote effectively a book that's never been published called Bloody Sunday in Sequence. What he did then was that every actor that came to play a part in the film, they had 3 or 4 pages from that book, effectively showing the factual evidence for the scene that was in the film.
He worked with Jimmy to such a level of detail. They made sure that every person's story was told, and that Jimmy then had the license then to look at which story he felt would be most impactful.
Stephen did all the research for Sunday in Derry and across Ireland. Channel 4 did the rest of the UK, and the soldiers. Partly, I think, because they wanted, they wanted to be solid, that it was all, it was going for the truth. It wasn't propaganda, and we were happy with that. We didn't want propaganda either.
Then was actually, how do you make this? That's where Stephen, I think, really came into his own as a person, who wasn't just interested in film, but would learn then every single thing that you would have to learn about being a film producer.
And I think it's a credit to Stephen Gargan mainly, because Stephen had the foresight and the integrity of the film, that every word on it is almost verbatim, that somebody said it somewhere. It tells the story of what happened, the truth of Bloody Sunday.
And I talked about, passion having a price. He made the film Sunday. It was nominated for an Emmy. He went to New York to the Emmy Awards. He was at the film festival in Taormina. We were broke. He was skint, and he was in Sicily, surrounded by all these, the good and the great of the movie world, and that was just Stephen. That was who he was. He was not, he wasn't affected, or he didn't become somebody else, or didn't let it all go to his head.
When you show it, and then you have a person walking up to the front of the theatre who was in the film, who actually lived it, and can take questions from the audience, whether it's in America or in Derry. That was very, very powerful. And that process of screening something and then opening up a discussion with people who've just seen a film was the basis of us beginning to understand that we could use this kind of process to create a project that looks at the conflict. That isn't just looking at one incident like Bloody Sunday, which for us was the big incident. But if you lost your father or brother to the IRA or to loyalists, that was the big incident in the conflict for you. And so Epilogues come out of those considerations. We knew the power of personal testimony. We knew the power of drama. What Epilogues is a multimedia workshop education program, and it explores the conflict through 27 stories. And those 27 stories give us the three main narratives of the conflict. So Republicans and their victims, loyalists and their victims, security forces and their victims, all talking about their use of violence, how they dealt with loss that they were encountering, what part did revenge play in their involvement, was forgiveness a necessary thing, where did justice fit into their view of things, and what about human rights? What is the relationship between human rights, democracy and justice?
You know Jim as well as Stephen, and chalk and cheese they were, the pair of them. Stephen was always measured and calm and unflappable, and Jim was jumping up and down all the time, excitable.
But so Stephen and me, I think we were a complementary. We were complementary energies and great respect for each other. Like, I felt I was part of his family, and he felt I was part of mine. And at the crucial moments in both our lives, we would turn to each other to actually check our thinking or figure out things.
But between the two of them, they sold the Epilogues to me, quite possibly under false pretences that it wouldn't take as long as it did. They'd have been good interrogators, like if it come to Castlereagh. They pulled out more information than was absolutely necessary or than I had intended to impart. A whole series of conversations with people who had lived through, been part of the troubles, the conflict, the war. Hard to keep up with the new terminology, but whatever it was, those of us that were in it to the neck were interviewed in Epilogues. It was a very, very well thought out programme, and a lot of the value in it was the capacity of Stephen to interview the way he did and get people comfortable with talking about things that they might normally not talk about.
Everybody's a little bit scared of Epilogues because it doesn't take a position. It gets people to think for themselves, and that's a dangerous thing if you're trying. That's a dangerous thing if you're trying to control people on whatever side of the fence.
Stephen and Jim also developed the Just Us programme for younger citizens, which was designed to enable young people to address sensitive and controversial issues that have tended to be avoided in the classroom and youth work settings.
Stephen and Jim, through the Epilogues programme, attempted to ask the difficult questions that still need answered. He looked to the future. He didn't always look to the past. But unless you look to the past, you'll have no hope of understanding the present, and certainly have no idea of where things might go in the future. Here's what Stephen had to say about the Epilogues programme. I came to realise during the course of the development process that I had embarked upon a much more intensely personal and challenging journey than I had first anticipated. He continues, I discovered for myself that violence and war diminishes all, and when society goes down that road, each one of us loses a piece of his or her own humanity, because over time we become complicit and implicated in events. We take sides, we condone, we condemn, we ignore. I learned that if we are to truly make peace with one another, we have to be prepared to have our certainties and our absolutes disturbed and deconstructed. And we have to be prepared to accept responsibility and say why we supported violence, whether that was the violence of the IRA, the violence of the British state, or the violence of loyalism. And if and where necessary, we have to be prepared to say we were wrong. I remember the morning of the announcement of Savil's report very well. I was filled with nervous energy. Myself and Stephen were busy erecting a banner across William Street on the very spot where the British Army stopped the original Civil Rights March. The banner depicted an image of the Widgery Tribunal, and as the Bloody Sunday families made their way to the Guildhall 37 years later, they symbolically tore through Widgery's whitewash report. At the Guildhall Square, the place was rammed with supporters and the world's media. There was a great cheer from the crowd when Cameron uttered his unjustified and unjustifiable speech.
Some members of our armed forces acted wrongly. The government is ultimately responsible for the conduct of the armed forces, and for that, on behalf of the government, indeed on behalf of our country, I am deeply sorry. So too is it clear in some of its other findings.
And I remembered thinking, we had discussed this possible scenario when at a planning meeting prior to the day itself, there was a suggestion of placing a large screen in the Guildhall Square to live stream Cameron's speech. I remarked at the time that he would likely declare the murdered innocent, and naturally this would receive applause from the crowd. And I questioned, was this the image we wanted to help send out? But like everyone else gathered that day, I felt very proud of what we had collectively achieved. The British establishment, however, had successfully controlled the political narrative and had got their choreographed media soundbite. It was only later on that it became clear that Savil's findings cast a shadow over the innocence of Ger Donaghy. And while we were in a buoyant mood out the front of the Guildhall, little did we know that inside the Guildhall, Ger Donaghy's sister Mary was broken-hearted. I know that Stephen really felt that deeply. We discussed the day afterwards and why there was a need to respond right away with the ink hardly dried on the report, declaring a victory. There was much to celebrate in Savil's findings, but we felt there should have been time to read the report and then give a more considered response. That didn't happen. After Savile, Stephen remained committed to campaigning on Bloody Sunday. He strongly believed that those who should be held accountable were the British establishment, their political leaders and their military commanders.
You know, for me, I believed that at the outset that Bloody Sunday was a planned operation. It was sanctioned. It was sanctioned at the highest level. There was no smoke and gun in terms of evidence, but everything that we uncovered, everything that's since been revealed, points to, and in my mind confirms, that it was a planned operation. And Savile actually got us closer to the truth, much closer than Widgery ever did. But Savile actually just came up with 9 lowly soldiers and 1 officer, and they were the people responsible. And then it was down to 1 soldier, Soldier F, and now it's no soldiers. So nobody is held accountable.
Later it was announced in the local media that the 39th anniversary march would be the last. It came as a shock to many, including myself, Stephen and Jim, long-standing activists within the Bloody Sunday Weekend Committee. This decision was made without any proper discussion or debate. The Bloody Sunday Massacre itself was the state's attempt to try and terrorise citizens from taking to the streets. And it was public demonstrations of support through the various marches that had led the way of the campaign up until this point. The Bloody Sunday Anniversary March was the one national demonstration where people from throughout the country and beyond came together to not only support that campaign, but also highlight our injustices, be that in Ballymurphy, Gaza, Hillsborough or Grenville. At the start of January, we stood down from the committee. However, we did attend the 39th anniversary march. But when the march itself made its way down William Street and at the junction of Russell Street, with the main body of the march heading down towards the Guildhall, along with some Bloody Sunday family members and activists, we turned towards Free Derry Wall. Stephen then became active in the Bloody Sunday March Committee and continued on the journey that he had started in 1985.
Stephen seemed to know about a lot of people, you know, from around the world, to be honest with you, that I can't even remember their names now, but he did know. He had a wide range of people. Obviously had made connections over the years, you know, and maybe that made the job easier for us. But I think Stephen had a vision about this march, and I think he was using it, all of us really were, to highlight all sorts of issues.
Stephen believed that an injustice they won is an injustice they all. Over the years, he also focused on and supported other causes in Ireland, including Shell to Sea, the Black Shamrock, Raytheon campaigns, anti-internment, and international causes in Gaza and Palestine.
One of Stephen's great strengths was the fact that he could reach out to other activists in other countries, and he saw the value in linking campaigns with common cause. Like one of the prime examples is his relationship and our relationship with Stafford Scott. It was sparked out of the murder of Mark Duggan by the Metropolitan Police in London, and Stephen reached out to Stafford to give voice and, you know, shine a light on what had happened to Mark.
Over the years, I've come to learn much from him in terms of strategy and delivery of objectives and global thinking and linking with other struggles. We worked on the premise that, or on the principle that an injury to one was an injury to all. Focus on our commonality as opposed to our differences, we could come together and support each other in this long and hard struggle to try and get this thing called justice.
He did have a bottomless well of love for people, you know, and for the people he cared really deeply about. You got that, you know, and you know, I chatted about all his activism and that conflict and all the hard and difficult times, but he loved the party, he loved to enjoy himself.
From my teens I would have been into people like Tangerine Dream and Klaus Schultz and the Kraftwerk and people like that. Probably from the mid-90s, 93, say 94, 95, I would have been sort of tuning into stuff in Dublin, because I would have been up and down to Dublin a lot, going to places like the Ormond Multimedia Centre, Ormond Hotel, places like that, seeing people like Decal, Johnny Moy, Billy Scurry, people like that.
The rave scene sort of exploded in Derry around 1991, and immediately myself and all our crew in Chantal were smitten by the rave, and our weekends were spent going to raves and parties all over Derry, Donegal, Belfast, Dublin, wherever the good ones were, we were there. Eventually as the scene progressed and we get into it more, the music that sort of we were hearing at nights in Derry or whatever wasn't sort of doing it for us. We were having to go to Belfast, to like Shine, or Dublin, to the Red Box, or a pod or whatever, just to hear the sounds we wanted to hear. So following a few months of dreaming, myself and Jinxie and Dave Campbell and Fergal McCluskey decided to start our own night called Deep Fried Funk.
Whenever Deep Fried Funk came together in Derry, that was definitely where we wanted to be.
Deep fried funk were playing, using a night upstairs in the Gunlow bar, and I remember going along with my partner Alison Ballard at the time. You know, we loved it. So we loved what you were doing, we loved the music, and I remember we had a weekly committee meeting, and I remember going back to the committee meeting saying, look, if we're about trying to support and nurture community arts and community projects, these fellas are doing something that's new, it's fresh, they're all from Derry, got a vision. So I just suggested to the committee that we would give, you know, a few £100 to yourselves to try and help in terms of what you were doing.
Standing dance floor and this Dublin boy comes up to us and says, what about you? I'm Stephen Gargan, I'm from Gasyard Wall Féile. We really like what you're doing. There's a check there, book yourselves a DJ. So myself and Stephen immediately had it off. We seemed like-minded heads. I've had a couple of weeks of that first meeting in the Dunlow. Myself and my partner Janet and Stephen and his partner Alison, we were going to raves in Belfast together and weekends away and whatever. So it was a start of a lovely relationship and friendship, and that crew gradually grew into like the deep fried crew.
And all the young shanty heads making their name in the dance scenes. And even Alexa, Sean Sample, God rest him, out bopping too, like, you know what I mean? That was all the wee crew. Just sort of snowballed from that.
The thing that stands out for me more than anything was that those people that we met, that first time we went upstairs in the Dunlow, you know, I consider them all friends today. So that's the thing that stands out for me more than anything, was the friendships that actually emerged out of that whole period. And there's a whole host of people that, you know, I would have never known. And I got to know them through the music and got to know them through the nights.
Being a part of a good crew of people that just enjoyed music, dancing. Could have been in a dance hall, could have been on a beach, could have been in a field.
Never any hassle, as you say. Good clean fun.
Good clean fun, definitely.
Nobody lost
that. All the time we spent in Helen and Bob's kitchen, you know, it wasn't unusual to have a Wednesday night, which was like a party night. Deep fried funk Sunday nights and Sandinos, which were absolutely legendary. How did we all get up for work the next day? I don't know, but it didn't matter so long as we were there.
People go to the gym now, like, but back then you just didn't need a gym. You would just, if you had one of these watches that counted your steps, you'd be in shock.
You would have been doing all the running and I would have been watching the kids.
Yep.
Aye, for deaths, aye. But my memories would be more nights when Alice and Stephen would come round the hours and
that's right, the Wednesday night club.
Was it a Wednesday night?
A Wednesday night club every week for a very long time. I don't know how we managed it, but couldn't do it now.
Stephen was at most parties, and like he would have always been kind of reserved. You know, whether it been our boys with our tops off swinging from stuff, like Stephen would have been that kind of frantic, you know. But he would have been reserved, but he busted an old groove. But it had to be in a dark room, basically, you know.
We definitely had the most amazing crack. Really do. You look back with great fun.
And he was a major catalyst and all that, you know what I mean?
And Jacqueline Wayne, aye.
As you say, no matter what you suggested, he would go, okay.
Nothing we enjoyed more than was getting out of Derry, basically, and going dancing.
Maybe 15, 16 years ago, there was this sort of cheap flight revolution, where you'd like Ryanair and EasyJet appearing on the market, and it sort of brought these European destinations within easy reach to yourselves. The crack that was being had, you know, hassle-free, laughter, great fun. We just wanted to do it more and more. So over the next few years now, with further destinations came on the map. So we were going to Glasgow, or that was Lerches or Sub Club. We were going to Amsterdam, we were going to Berlin.
Stephen was a big fan of Berlin, and it became a favourite of ours because we used to be able to get on the Berghain at the time.
Myself, Jinxie, Stephen and Pepsi, we would been the crew that would have went to Berlin maybe 3-4 times a year. I found this club. It's probably renowned as the best club in the world, Berghain. Panorama bar. It was just perfection. It was like as if we'd found that place that we'd been searching for. It was dark. Sound system was amazing, the lights was amazing, the music was amazing. It had that sort of edginess, but a debauchery going on in there. bit of stuff that you can't really talk about on camera.
At its height, it becomes a personal thing between you and what you're listening to. And then what you have, of course, is you're there sharing that moment with people. So you're kind of ebbing and flowing between a very personal, intense experience between yourself and what it is you're hearing. And then you're also dipping in and out of that because you're with friends and you're sharing it with friends. And the reason you're there together is because they're getting something similar out of it as well. They're having a very profound experience, and the experience is between them and the music. So it's the same for me. I have an experience and it's between me and the music, but then we can share it as a group as well.
Some might think that like boys away on holidays, boys away on these exotic destinations and dodgy clubs or whatever, that it wouldn't be good, clean fun, but it was.
Being in Berlin was going shopping with Sturdy and Stephen for coats, big winter coats. I already had one, so I was just tagging along, getting dragged through Berlin for hours upon hours, on the shop after shop. Sturdy could basically, after 3 days, get sorted with one, but it took Stephen 3 years to get one. And then he wouldn't wear it because of his fur in the car.
All these trips, the vast majority of them was wanders, aimless wandering for hours and hours, just wandering through these cities, sort of marvelling at their infrastructure and how they functioned. And we'd always come back to the question, you know, why's our cities not like us? Why's Ireland not like us? You know, so I probably set Stephen off in a political conversation where eventually the Brits got the blame.
If you're going to events in Europe, or you know, if you're, whether it's Berlin or Barcelona or whatever, it's still very clear where you can see where there's all ages attend events. So the idea that you can still do something like that in Derry for me is important. So if Deep Fried or if Keltronic have got somebody on as part of their programme and I'm interested, I want to be able to go along and see them. And the events that you put on and the venues, you know, the St. Colum's Hall coming online there several years ago, I mean, that's an amazing venue. So, you know, you really appreciate the opportunity that you can go and hear the best of stuff that's going on in the world.
When we weren't dancing, you know, our socialising would have been maybe either in our house or Stephen's house or wherever, like, you know, by date and a few beer and listening to music. You know, and I suppose that's where I would have done my my market research. And I had sort of an idea of who I was looking to invite to Derry or what artists I was sort of thinking of. So if it was my house, I'd be playing that music and you'd be looking to see if Stephen's ears perked up or maybe commented and going, oh, what's that? What's that, like a sound of that? And that would sort of give me the confidence to go, I think that'll work out, we'll go with that. We'll book that for the next Keltronic or whatever. Keltronic's now been going 23 years. And if I was to think of one person that was like maybe a mainstay or somebody that got it, what we were trying to do, you know, if there was one person out of all those thousands of people that have came through our doors, the generations have came through our doors, you know, Stephen's would be the number one. You know, he understood what we were at, he was supportive in what we were doing, and the proof was in the pudding, he was there on the dance floor.
So after many years of adventures, we had great times in Paris, Rome, Florence, Barcelona, Thailand. We had the best holiday ever in Thailand. We crowned ourselves King and Queen of the Jungle on the back of an elephant in Thailand. But after all that came his next great achievement. We decided to bring another little life into this world. That wasn't easy for Stephen to do. That was actually a really hard thing for him to do because he was always conscious of Trina and how Trina was in Dublin and the strain and again the sacrifice that she was making effectively with him being in Derry and everything that he was passionately committed to in Derry. It happened very quickly and the result was Dara, who he loved with all his heart.
Look at me, look. Me and you sing a song. Tell me all about where are we?
On the holidays.
And what, is it good?
Yes, it is good.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dara. Happy birthday to you. Hip, hip. He was just an amazing baby. He was just full of smiles. Nearly as soon as he could make a noise, he was talking, and when he started talking, I don't think he stopped for years.
Oh, God bless. Don't run. Come in off. Come in off that, because you'll slip.
We couldn't ask for a better son. Neither of us were religious, and we would have felt hypocritical doing a baptism. We decided to have a welcome to the world party for Dara. On the summer solstice of 2003, the sun was shining and all our friends and family were together, and we had a welcome to the world for Dara. That was the start of spending many summers here in this house.
My dad loved that house. Both my parents loved it.
And all our family and friends have had good times in this house. We had an open door policy. People would come and we'd just say, come in, that's it. We would eat, we would drink, we would go to the beach, we would take a walk into the bar, and we just had so many happy memories here. I went through a particularly difficult few years with my dad, when my dad had dementia. And because he was young and he was incredibly fit, it was very, very hard to look after him. That took a huge emotional toll on me, took a huge emotional toll on the family. And I know Stephen heard about it as well too, because I know that he loved my dad. But eventually, we got to a point where we decided to part ways. But we agreed that we were always, and Dara's parents, we were always 100% together in that.
Right, now you don't have to touch anything. Just point it at me and Mammy. Right,
Can you see us?
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
Right.
hold on now.
It's the fabulous cracker that Dara made for his mummy and daddy.
Have you got the two of us?
Yep. 1, 2,
2, 3, go!
Oh!
Wonder what he's got.
Oh! Big bang! What we didn't know was ahead of us then was in terms of Dara then, getting into his teenage years and starting to struggle with, some mental health issues. And I know that's something that Stephen really struggled with. It was very difficult through lockdown and so on because Dara was very withdrawn, he was very isolated. And Stephen would come to the house and, and he would try and talk to him, and it must have been very difficult for him to actually to do that. But we continued to be together for Dara as much as we possibly could be. The day Dara got his diagnosis, because we were still had COVID measures, Stephen and I couldn't be there, so we sat in my kitchen on a call, a group call, with knowing that Dara was in a room with a psychiatrist and this community psychiatric nurse, having a conversation where she actually gave him his diagnosis, and we were sat in my kitchen sitting around a phone on a speaker. That was quite a profound moment. So that then becomes something that you have to, come to terms with, and it's not easy. And Stephen would, I know that he would get frustrated, but he would get frustrated out of just wanting the best for Dara.
For him, I think that was probably one of the most challenging things he ever experienced, having to go through that experience. And visiting me in the hospital, and I wasn't in a good way in the hospital, and having to see me in that state was very hard for him. And I think in the last few years of his life, I think all the stuff that was going on with me was a big burden for him to carry. It was a big heavy load, and it was a big pressure. After my parents split up, he was very set on maintaining a good relationship, and we were always going out and about. My dad was always a big lover of nature, always encouraging me to get out of the house and to go out into the countryside. And he would always say, you You've got Donegal on your doorstep.
Me and Dad definitely would have been brought up as brothers, a very brotherly relationship, still would be that way, still very close to each other. Instilled in us from a young age just a general appreciation for nature, always making sure we're out and about, staying active, not too much time on the PlayStation or anything like that there. Hey, always making sure we're getting out and about.
Probably our favourite activity that we like to do is go out on a drive somewhere, and we go all kinds of places, you know. Favourite was probably going in Tulla Bay, driving down there and getting a cup of tea and a coffee and all, and sitting on the beach. That would be good. Then going up to, as a child, we were always going up to Greenan and we'd sit. I remember we used to go up regularly and sit in the car in Greenan, and my dad would read me books. Like I remember when he used to read me like Harry Potter and like The Hobbit and stuff like that.
It was a really special book. The Hobbit was a really special book for me and my dad, and I know it was for Dad and Dara as well. And I have lovely memories of Dad reading me chapters from the book when I'd stay over with him in his flat in Terranure when I was maybe 5 or 6. We tried to make our way through the book, and we did eventually, but it slowed us down, the fact that anytime he read it, I always insisted that he read my favourite chapter, which was roast mutton, about the trolls in the mountains and how they captured the dwarves and the hobbits and stuff. And I used to love that Dad would do the voices of the trolls, and so I always made him do that chapter each time.
I think he needed to get out into nature.
He'd send us pictures of the scenery. He loved the beaches. Didn't he, out
his
walking?
Phoenix Park here for his escapism, Donegal was up there.
You would get better quality conversations when you were in these, nice looking places, and you could have, you could look around at a beautiful view while you were talking about something mental or interesting or strange or startling. We would definitely have held opposing beliefs a lot of the time, but I'd say we held more beliefs in common than we held different from each other. 99% of the time when he was talking about something, sharing an opinion on something, he was right on. He was definitely very involved in my life, and I wanted to be involved, and he cared so deeply. He was so invested in my life and me having a good life and a good quality of life. I couldn't have asked for a better father, I don't think. Since I was born, he wanted me to have a connection with everybody down in Dublin. He wanted me to have a connection with my nana and granddad. He wanted me to have a connection with my aunties and my cousins, and as I got older, he wanted me to have a connection with his friends like Paddy and Jim and Sean. He wanted Trina to be a part of my life and to be a sister, and for me to feel that.
Dara, can I have a kiss, please? Can I have a small little kiss here? Can I? Go on.
You going over to Trina, giving Trina...
A little small kiss.
Trina, Dara, give Trina a kiss. Oh, come on.
Go on, give me a little one. Oh, I got it. I took it anyway from the little baby crawling on the floor. When I thought about what I wanted to say about Dad or about my relationship with Dad, the title of the piece kind of spurred me on to talk about the special connections that me and Dad had when he was with me, whether it was going for a walk in the Phoenix Park or walking on a beach or sitting down having a pint or a cup of tea or whatever. I do feel like that time that we did have together, he really poured all his, concern and love and consideration, and he poured that into me, and he was focused on me in those moments. I didn't live with my dad from the time I was 4, I think, so the physical distance was there between us throughout my whole life, and we did have to work at maintaining our relationship. There were long periods of time when he was absent, and all we really had were phone calls, and when you're a child, it's very hard to make a connection with a parent or with anyone on the end of a phone. There was no camera phones or anything like that. So we did, we loved each other, and we knew, I suppose in my teens, I recognised how important my dad was to me and that I wanted to maintain that relationship. One of my favourite things to do with Dad was to go to gigs, or even just to go into town in Dublin and go for pints, and we would have great talks and great chats, and really counsel each other and talk to each other about what was really going on in our lives. And as I got older, you know, I was sometimes the one listening to his problems or worries and counselling him through it. And in a lot of ways, you know, obviously as I was an adult, we were kind of more like best friends than we were father and daughter.
You'd get told earlier in the week, oh, Stephen's coming down this weekend to visit Nanny, so he's very close with me mum. He might call down this week, so like you'd know the house be getting cleaned or the food would get me food more in.
I have to say he always came back. 5 weeks would be the longest really.
Yeah.
We wouldn't see him, and that was right through up until he passed.
Over the last 40 years, we've never lost contact. The Patriots became the regular, and that became literally me, him, Paddy McCormick, and my brother, Sean Carney. But it was funny because it was also kind of an old man's bar, you know, so we'd become old men. But you kind of think, how the fuck did that happen? But anyway, it does, you know. He became the catalyst for us meeting, that we wouldn't actually even bother meeting each other until he'd say, he'd literally just send a text to say, I'm on my way down. And that meant basically, without having anyone even actually having to say it, that meant 8 o'clock in the Patriots. That could spill over into Saturday or maybe Sunday, but mostly not, because he'd be seeing the grandkids and the daughter and stuff like that, you know.
In 2007, Stephen became a grandfather to Trina's first child, Quiva, who was born in Boston. Quiva's strong-minded nature always tested her granddad's patience, but her quick sense of humour always had him laughing. Roisin is full of strength and spirit and a fierce friend, just like her granddad.
He always had an interest, yeah, in all of them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he'd ring, how are they doing, how's work for them, and, you know, their children as well. He'd ring and see how they are.
Stephen would have been a very supportive uncle to me. I took an interest in history from an early age, and obviously Stephen was into history as well. So this is kind of the relationship we had. It would have been built on a lot of like interesting things. I remember most Christmases and birthdays, I would have been a history book. Most kids now would probably complain if they got a history book, but for me, it kind of opened new windows. It kind of taught me things about I didn't know. I might not have looked into it myself if I hadn't got these books otherwise. So genuinely did open things. I have a book here actually from probably when I was 10 or 11. Stephen got this for Christmas, and I still remember I brought it into school in 5th class, and I still have it now today. Now I actually teach history in school, so Stephen supported me with stuff like that. It kind of gave me an interest, and then I went on to do it myself. I looked back over the messages I had with Stephen after he passed away on WhatsApp and message, and for the past 2 or 3 years it would have been like, oh, how was college? What's the next step? He wasn't just like, oh, you're getting on okay. He was genuinely interested in what I was doing. He'd always ask me mum as well, like, what's Brian? And she'd never know, so I'd get a text, or anytime I got results, he'd get onto me straight away saying, well done, your nanny be very proud of you, and I'm very proud of you.
3 years ago, if he was down, my mum wouldn't go to sleep until he was in. She'd leave the key, and it could be 3, 4 in the morning, and is that you, Stephen? And once she heard that, then she'd close her eyes. Yeah. And she'd say, he came in a terrible state last night, and I don't know how he got home, and he's going to set the house on fire. I heard him cooking down there. On the last night, we didn't know it was her last night. She just wasn't well. And I rang him on that morning and said, Stephen, Mum's different, she's not well. And he said, do you think I should come down? And I said, yeah. And we said, Stephen's coming down, and she was thrilled. And
she was worried about where he'd get his Christmas dinner.
Oh, yeah.
She kept saying, now if he comes down, won't just make sure he gets his Christmas dinner with one of you.
And wouldn't it be great if I go now? She'd say, because rather than being so sick around us for Christmas, and we're saying, Ma'am, please don't say that. But she was so worried about Stephen coming down for Christmas. And our poor mum, the whole year we'd masks on. We were afraid we'd give her COVID because she had lung cancer. Terrible time.
Yeah.
Terrible time. And when Stephen came, he pulled up at 2:30, came up the stairs, they chatted for a minute, a nurse called, and then she just drifted, and the nurse said she's gone, and he said, fuck these masks, and ripped the mask
we all
off
ripped
and
their
gave
masks
her a big kiss
off and hugged her.
Yeah.
And then she just
went to
passed away.
Yeah.
Stephen lived alone in Jacqueline Way as the world remained apart due to the COVID-19 pandemic for most of 2020 and 2021. After a chance encounter, Stephen began a relationship with Desiree.
First date we actually have being Stephen. He took me for a walk on the beach, and of course it started to rain, so we ran back to the car and we got in the car and took us to a wee pub, to dry off, and got a wee bowl of soup to heat up, and then went home and realised we'd done a runner. I always thought of us as two lost ships at sea, just, you know what I mean? I always thought we were just two lost ships at sea, just floating about, just waiting for somebody to come into our lives, and it happened so unexpectedly, and we just became each other's lighthouses. And I just think that set the tone for our whole relationship, just carefree, adventurous, comfortable, happy, laughs. He was adventurous and he wasn't afraid to do anything, and he pushed me to do a whole lot of things, He would say, do you want to go a walk? And it would end up a 3-hour hike, and he'd be like 13 years older than me, hiking, marching up the hill, and I'd be gasping for breath behind him, and he would take me up and there'd be amazing views, and we'd just spend, hours just sitting looking at the views and chatting. I feel as if my relationship with Stephen was perfect. I do. We had so many plans, and nobody would imagine that 1 minute you'd be sitting beside somebody and you're so comfortable and it's so warm, and you're talking about that evening and your plans, and then the next minute you're like, they're not there anymore. There's no plans, there's no talking, there's no heat, there's no person.
I woke up at about, I was up, it was sort of late morning, and I got a phone call from Trina. And she got a phone call from Desiree, who was down in the house in Jacqueline Way and had found my dad collapsed, and she phoned Trina, and Trina phoned me, and so I told my mum. We drove down to the house, and as we were driving down, I phoned Jim Keys.
I actually think if I had heard about it after the event, I would have really struggled. I was there within 15 minutes of Dara ringing me. I was literally in the room when we were trying to bring him back to life,
On the morning of Sunday, November 27th, I was down in Bay Road soccer, as I normally was every Sunday morning, watching Larkin play football, and a phone call came through, and it was Alison. And normally when I answer the phone to Alison, it's usually with a joke or slagging or something, and I quickly realised that it wasn't funny. She said that Stephen had collapsed and they were working with him and trying to bring him back. And I'm sitting in this football ground surrounded by parents and your children and stuff, and you're going, how the fuck am I going to deal with this here? What do you do here? What do you do here?
In the hospital, they looked after us so well. The NHS is under such incredible pressure. These people, they wouldn't stop at working on him until we were okay with it, and we got to be there and we got to say goodbye to him.
It was just one of them days where you know that there's a kind of near a rupture in life.
But a big shock when he went, hey? Total shock.
A real big shock.
I heard the news in the car along with my daughter, in the middle of town, and utter shock. That's just another shock. Just one shock at that. Jim was actually Jim rang me, but he was in bits as well. But it's utter shock.
I was at my work when I found out. I remember just thinking, no, not Stephen. Couldn't be. Not Stephen. He's too fit and active. Couldn't be him. But
simply couldn't believe that somebody who was such a presence, was a lively presence in Derry, had been taken so quickly.
Just hard to believe. Just fucking, don't know, surreal, shock, panic. Fucking, I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Trina came up that day, and so did my aunties a few hours later.
We were there for the week really, and our children followed up, and it was just amazing to see the Derry people. He was just part of all their lives, and He'd some friends. He always talked
We'd never
about
have
everyone.
a wake like that here.
And people just kept coming in. They all had different stories about him, and it was just beautiful to hear. And
the whole week of the wake and the funeral itself went so well.
Everybody rallied around and thought, what's the right thing to do for Stephen here? How do we honour him in a way that's, that's right for him? And it's not run-of-the-mill, because Stephen wasn't run-of-the-mill.
I mean, he obviously wasn't religious. That was part of the healing immediately for me, and I know for everyone else, is that we, like him and his life, we took control in his death, and that we celebrated him. We, I suppose, tried to honour him as he deserved, I suppose.
Stephen said, listen, I've had time to think since Mum passed. I'd like to be buried here. And Brenda laughed and went, we'll see who gets there first. And we all laughed in a joke. But it's so good that he said that, because we probably wouldn't have said, oh no, he definitely should be coming to Dublin. He told the whole lot of us up at the grave, I want to come back here and be buried with Mum and Dad.
It was weird, and I kept laughing and saying to him, no, whoever gets it first, I'm going to get him first.
Yeah.
Because I was only to be out of the hospital with the operation, and he says, no, he says, I want to.
You said that if I get there before
we'll see who gets there.
We just laughed about it.
Well, when it came to the actual service at St. Colum's Hall, before we went to Dublin for the funeral, I played a song as part of the service on a piano that was there. I played Man of the World, which is a Fleetwood Mac song written by Peter Green. My dad loved that song, and I chose to play that song because it felt right. I felt like it suited the moment.
I owed it to him to say a few good words about him, because how good he was to me growing up. Like, I feel like I owed him that there, to be just say a few words and let people aware of the impact they had on me.
That was the closest thing I've seen to 2020 vision happening recently. That flowering of just everybody coming together and making something happen, and all of that, the paraphernalia that Stephen and myself were involved in doing over 30 years, just being the backdrop to his coffin, and the way that was curated, the way people contributed, the way everybody turned up. And Stephen would have been cringing, but at the same time, I think, he would have got it. He would have got it and appreciated it.
Just spectacular, the way it was put together, and it was the fact that the church wasn't involved. And it was friends, and it was a celebration of Stephen's life, and with people who loved him and cared, and it was something that I think Stephen would have wanted himself, So if there's a fucking priest running about when I'm lying in a box, I'll be getting back up again.
Following the service at St. Colum's Hall, Stephen returned to Dublin for the last time for his burial in Newlands Cross Cemetery.
For a long time, it's kind of felt like, oh, he's just gone to Dublin for a few days and he'll be back soon. And, so it's taken a while for the reality to really sink in. But what it also done now is it's created a bit of space where we think about the things that he has done, the things he's brought to our lives, how he's brought us together, how he's a common theme.
People are your friend or become your friend because of who you are, not because of what you say, not because of your politics, but because of who you are. So it was who he was that affected the people who met him.
The best people in the world, you don't even notice what they're doing until they're gone and everybody owns up, which is a pity. It's a pity. If we were less reticent about the people we care about and telling them we care about them and praising the people and acknowledging what the people do when they're still here doing it, we would grieve less. who would grieve less when we lose him.
There won't be statues put up to him because that's not the type of person he was. He was an ordinary person, like us, but like so many ordinary people become extraordinary in particular circumstances. He became an extraordinary person and an honorary Derry man, which is a great tribute.
He never took his foot off the pedal, you know, and he was always focused and always driven and always remained centred on what the issue was. And I never saw him deviate from that. And quite often he was working with projects that were never really well funded. It was always a struggle, and he never gave up, you know, and it was inspiring.
This might be a very strange thing to say about a proud dub from Ballyfermot, but for me, Stephen Gargan perfectly embodied the spirit of this war. Having come into his orbit, you immediately feel freer. He lived his life and applied this message to his everyday. He lived the change he wanted to see. And after many years transforming this war on a multitude of campaigns and issues, it's no wonder it became part of his DNA.
I would thank Stephen so much. Do you know, if he was here, I'd give him such a hug. You know, he really was an excellent, top-notch human being. You know, I never heard him say anything bad about anybody. It just wasn't the type. Just wasn't the type, you know.
I miss him, and it's just... I'll tell you what, we're privileged to have known him. You know, honest to God, I'm delighted that I knew him and I met him, you know, and spent time with him, because he was a fantastic human being. And there's not a wild lot of people. There's very few and far between, like Stephen Gargan. There's only about 4 people in my life, and he was a man and a bargain. Do you know what I mean? And there's about 4 people in my life that I would point out, but he was up there. You know.
Whenever I first met him, that he was kind of know-it-all, you know.
Know-it-all?
And I was kind of,
what do you mean, like
I'm a
very clever?
bit wary to meet this boy, you know. He sounds so, he knows about everything, and he has his concern about what's going on and all the rest of it, maybe more than anybody.
Well, if he was a know-it-all, he was well nice way also.
Well, there you go.
No, but I mean, after you talked to him, you must have felt at ease, like, you know what I mean? Because Stephen always looked at you and let you talk and listened to you.
That's right, he did.
He really did, like, you know.
My name's Kathleen and I'm from Jacqueline Way, and Stephen has been a neighbour of ours for the last 25 years. Now he's been a great neighbour and would have helped anyone at all in the street. We used to clean the street together, so we did, and he's so badly missed. And you see, that Saturday we were going to Mullenhead for the weekend, and we walked down the street and up the steps with him, and he wanted to carry my bags, and he said, enjoy your weekend, we'll see you on Monday. And I said, then I got the news on Sunday that Stephen had passed away. He's so badly missed.
I miss him well. I miss him for all of us, and I still look for his voice, and I love it when I can hear it, and I love it when I see him and good things that are still happening because of him.
Stephen was a very, really good friend. I felt close to Stephen. I felt kind of, he could be open, and there's not that many people about that could be like that, and Stephen was one of those, you know.
If I had to sum it up a bit, like I would say Stephen enlightened us, educated us and cultivated us.
He was a good friend of mine. I loved him as a friend, Stephen Gargan. And I knew that the feeling was mutual, because he was a considerate character, you know. It wasn't all about Stephen.
I'm just the happiest girl that I got to know Stephen all them years, and fab memories. Really great. He's badly missed.
In the days and weeks and months that have passed since Stephen passed away, it has been hard. Like, no, we're all heartbroken. Everybody's heartbroken. But I suppose it's been keeping me sane, as though just how lucky myself and Janet and the Waynes have been to have somebody like Stephen in our lives. Like, you know, just so lucky, and we'll be forever grateful for that.
Stephen was our best friend, and he loved coming down to watch me play football, and I loved going to walks with him, and he used to pass our house nearly every day. We used to go to the Derry City matches, and he loved coming to watch the Derry City play too, and see St Pat's and Bows play against Derry City. Secretly, we think he's a Derry City supporter instead of St Pat's and Bows. We miss Stephen a lot, and we love Stephen. He was our best friend, and we were very glad that we met him. Stephen, we love you.
I feel proud to say I know Stephen. I knew him. To know what he's done is just incredible, like, you know. I was actually talking to one of the lads in the job, and I was telling them about what was happening today. And I just got onto my phone, and I just showed, I googled Stephen's name, and the lad in the job was kind of taken back. Wow, you kind of knew someone, you know. But I just say, I'm really proud to say I knew Stephen, yeah. And I still know, because he's still there, like, he's still there, like, you know.
There's a special talent when somebody can actually spend time listening to you, and I think that's what he used to do. Do you know what I mean? Where a lot of people, when they're out and they're about, it's about themselves. You know what I mean? But I think he had a unique talent in listening.
He deserves to be here. He made people happy. He made everybody happy. He was a positive person. He was a good father, a good brother, a good comrade, a good friend, a good companion. He just deserves to be here.
My granddad always made time for us and always made us laugh when we were taking pictures together.
I just really wanted to have one more time to collect sticks with him, just one more time for all Ireland. So yeah, I love you, Granddad, and I miss you very much.
Stephen always a big part of my life, definitely. I wasn't the closest to my father growing up. He definitely stepped in and just took it upon himself to fill in that role. Always making sure me and Dad are getting treated equally, given same opportunities, stuff like that there, hey?
I'm so thankful for the time that I had with him, and especially these last few years where I felt like I got really properly close to him, and I knew him as a person, and you know, as a lot of things, as a father and a friend and someone to rely on and someone who could support you and all those things.
I always knew that he loved me, and I always felt like he was my dad. And he was a lot of things to a lot of people, but he was always my dad, and I always felt that connection, and I still feel it now.
Dara and I, for sure, are blessed with amazing friends. Dara and Trina have each other, and you know, the love of each other, and will look after each other. Stephen's family, you know, I think we'll always have that connection, and we'll always have, you know, we'll always retain that connection with Dublin, because, as I said, I think that's something that would have been really important to him. You know, he's a son in Dublin, but he's also a son of Derry.
It's a god-awful small affair to the girl with the mousy hair, but her mommy is yelling no, and her daddy has told her to go, but her friend is nowhere to be seen. Now she walks through her sunken dream to the seat with the clearest view, and she's hooked to the silver screen, but the film is a saddening bore, 'cause she's seen it 10 times or more. She could spit in the eyes of fools as they ask her to focus on sailors fighting in the dance hall. Oh man, look at those cavemen go. It's the freakiest show. Take a look at the lawman beating up the wrong guy. Oh man, wonder if he'll ever know. He's on the best-selling show. Is there life on Mars? It's on America's tortured brow. Mickey Mouse has grown up a cow. Now the workers have struck for fame, 'cause Lennon's on sale again. See the mice with their million hordes, from Ibiza to the Norfolk Broads. Rule Britannia is out of bounds. To my mother, my dog and clowns. But the film is a saddening bore, 'cause she writ it 10 times or more. It's about to be writ again, as I ask you to focus on sailors fighting in the dance hall. Oh man, look at those cavemen go. It's the freakiest show. Take a look at the lawman beating up the wrong guy. Oh man, wonder if he'll ever know. He's in the best-selling show. Is there life on Mars?